Let's roll. This is Countercharge, your podcast for ranks, flanks, and kings of war. Join your hosts as they delve into the world of Panithor and bring you worldwide coverage of all things Kings of War.
Welcome to Countercharge. I'm Alessio Cavatore.
And I'm Matt Gilbert.
I'm Rob Enough.
And I'm Matt Croger. Welcome. We are blessed with the presence of Matt Gilbert and Alessio tonight to talk to us about the imminent 4th edition and some of the changes that have taken place. Matt and Alessio, I hope you haven't been spending too much time looking on social media for all the clowns, imploding.
I try not to look at social media. I mean, it's not good for my mental health, I find.
I totally agree. Unfortunately, I make the mistake of looking a couple of times a day. Now, we thought we'd ask a couple of background questions straight up, but we kind of want to apologise also because, we don't want to take up too much of your time tonight. We won't extensively go into both of your guys' really interesting backgrounds. Like, for example, Matt, I won't ask you about who really had the 4-foot snake on the podcast, you used to be on. But we might start with you, Matt. You've been in the company with a long time now. I don't think all of our listeners probably would be overly familiar with your role within the company and how that's changed over time. Would you mind telling the listeners a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I guess it's coming up 10 years. So by the end of this year, it'll be 10 years I've been here. So I joined the company more on the ops side, really, kind of just as a coordinating role alongside Ronnie so basically delivering, but that was from the studio all the way through to operations, warehouse, etc. But when the studio manager at the time left, I just took over that role as a head of studio. So basically, at that point, everything comes through me from a kind of design creativity point of view. So from concept all the way through to reality. Ronnie and I share a lot of the ops stuff at the moment. Although obviously, as we get bigger, that will get delegated away. But I guess my main focus, certainly for the last 6 or 7 years, has been far more on the product itself.
Alessio, it's been 15 years.
Wow.
It's been a long time with Kings of War.
Wow.
And you were on it in the beginning, and then you took some breaks from it. What's it like to come back to a game that has been around for 15 years?
Wow, 15 years. That makes me feel so old. I was thinking, so 15 years against Workshop, and then I left Games Workshop and did Kings of War. So that was 15 years ago. So that makes me 30 years of writing rules. My God. All right. Yeah. Well, how was it? It was very interesting and challenging and interesting. Basically, it was a delicate thing. As in, you come in and you haven't played. I haven't played for quite a few years, and obviously you come to a 3rd edition, which I didn't see before. And I mean, it was definitely saw the evolution, and I definitely saw the evolution into something that was, I would say, owned by the community, done by the community. And so it felt very much a product that was very suitable for a certain type of player, mostly, I think, veterans, experts, people that are competitive players. But I think it made it a little bit difficult if you put yourself in the shoes of a beginner, somebody who doesn't know the game, never played it, doesn't know anything about it, then I think that was the thing that struck me. It was a very specialized set of rules. And I thought, maybe it needed to be made also a bit more accessible to newbies, people that never played. Seeing it from their point of view, it wasn't because I haven't played for a long time. I had a bit of those fresh eyes of a newbie. It's like, so if I was to start this today, what would I need? What would I like to have? That's pretty much the approach that I took. Yeah.
I love the fact that you use the word evolution. When you're making an update to a game, it's either going to be evolution or revolution. So when you look at what you've done with 4th edition, is it revolution?
I wouldn't think so. No, I mean, when I say that we wanted to make it accessible to beginners, but at the same time, of course, we don't want at all. The last thing we want is that community that exists to not like what happens. And if something is not broken, you don't need to fix it. And frankly, my feedback was that indeed that community is enjoying playing the game, is playing the game. There was no major issues. Of course, there's niggles. There always are niggles. Yeah, I mean, all wargaming is always an evolution. Like you said, the next edition is never perfect. There's always something that needs adjusting, tweaking, and then you put new books in, and the new books alter the balance, and then you need some more tweaking and adjusting to the new books until eventually at some point you will need the new edition. They are organic beasts. They keep evolving. They're never finished. Yeah, that's a fact. So no, I wouldn't call it a revolution. But what do you think? For me, is an evolution. Yeah, maybe a bit more radical than other, but not a revolution. It's still the same game.
Yeah, I think if you look at where we went from first to second and second to third, you could see what was changing there. I think going back and saying, okay, how do we present this and deliver this from the point of view of a new player, maybe someone who hasn't even ever played a war game before, not just new to this game, and bring all the existing players with us was the challenge. And I think you certainly pulled that off. But, in all of the games that we've played, it's never not felt like we've been playing Kings of War. We've been playing Kings of War with, and let's try this, and let's try that. Okay, that didn't work, let's try this. We've always played a game of Kings of War, and it's felt like Kings of War. So yes, certainly evolution and not revolution.
Matt, I guess further than that, during your tenure at Mantic, Kings of War hasn't really had the Alessio touch other than it being the core rules. Like, it's been 10 years since he was heavily involved. So what went into the decision to, decide it needed that gentle caress of Mr. Cavatore again?
Well, before I was with Mantic, I was involved in first edition, and then second edition I was the chair of the rules committee, and I wrote a lot of and kind of project managed the first Uncharted Empires book. So, I'd obviously worked with Alessio and Mantic on stuff before I joined. As second developed into third, and third was written, as Alessio said, by kind of the rules committee and the community. I think we felt we'd got to a point where it needed going back to someone whose profession it is to look at it with a clean pair of eyes and address the rules, all the things that we were looking at thinking, this is great. And so, just to be able to step back from that with a detached thinking and say, could it be better? Where are the good things? And, it didn't make sense for anyone other than Alessio to do that, because obviously he created the game in the first place.
We can't have a conversation with you guys without mentioning Ronnie. So Ronnie's been the benefactor of Kings of War for a long time. I've always found Ronnie to be very passionate, but more concerned with the feeling of a game rather than maybe specific game mechanics. Alessio, talk to me about how different it is working with Matt on rules design, game design, than Ronnie.
Yes, you are 100% correct. And I'm kind of used to, because I work for several companies, and whenever you're working on a rule system, there's always different stakeholders, right? And the stakeholders have different points of view and different needs, the different perception of what the game is and who is it for and how it plays. So often you have somebody like Ronnie who is more indeed passionate and less, he doesn't really care about the fine detail of the rules, as long as the perception is that the rules work. He doesn't really have that, he doesn't play competitive, he doesn't play, it's very competitive, but not in a serious way. And so, yes, he cares about the vibe and the feel of it. He wants to be quick and simple and fun. And so playtesting, we did a lot of internal playtesting, and is incredibly different playtesting with Ronnie or playtesting with Matt or playtesting with other players. Basically, if I'm playtesting with Matt, we get to a rules question, to a situation, and we go, okay, we think it works like this, but we'll always check the rules. That's a discipline that you have to do while playtesting. Doesn't matter what you think the rule says in this situation. Go read it. Yeah, read it and check that the rule actually says what's in your head. And so that's a slow. process. Yeah, it's very, in a way, it's tedious. They always stop the game, check the rules, stop the game, check the rules, talk about the rules. So they actually end up playing 1 turn, 2 turns, because you spend so much time arguing back and forth and talking about things. And when after with Ronnie, you cannot do that. You don't want to do that, because he will suddenly go, "Look, this game is boring, nothing is slow, etc." If you find a situation, you go with what you remember, because it's more important the ebb and flow of the game, the vibe, the fun, the situation. It doesn't matter whether that rule says the right thing. The skill there, I guess, is trying to remember afterwards and going, right, so we had that situation. Let me now check what the rule actually says. Did I get it right? So, yeah, it's very different, but it's very important. It's important that both type of approaches are served, that you do both things, both the feel and the rules, and the nitty-gritty of the rules.
I will often, early on in projects, put something in front of Ronnie and say, right, play that. And then the feedback you'll get is not specifically how to deal stuff with rules. It'll be like, right, that bit needs to be more fun. That's boring. Take that out. Make this bit took too long. You get that kind of feedback. And then he'll always want to play it again towards the end of the development, just to then, have his say on his fine-tuning on things. But it'll also be things like, no, don't do that. That's commercial suicide. I'm not signing up to that. So there's those things as well. So you've got there's different layers, as Alessio says. Different people will input different things to the project on the development.
It's funny when he goes something like, make it 50% more fun. Yes, sir, of course.
So you don't think it's commercial suicide that you've definitely gone to D8s, Matt? It's
D9s, no one else makes them.
D9s.
So, Alessio, you've been working with lots of companies. What is it like working with Mantic? What's the unique thing that Mantic's bringing to the table?
Well, every company is different. And what's different about Mantic? Well, certainly the community is a big thing in Mantic, I find, because obviously Mantic does a lot of crowdfunding. So the community is really important for Mantic. And so there's a lot of feedback from the rules committee. So there's more involvement in Mantic from the community. And obviously that makes it cool, because you are interacting with the people that the people that are more passionate about the game. It makes it difficult because of those passions. Obviously, you have to balance, because people, when you develop a new set of rules, whatever you do, some people will not like it. Whatever you do, if you do nothing, they will go, "Oh, you've done nothing. That's boring. You haven't changed it." If you change it, you go, "Oh, you changed it, but I don't like this change and that change." So basically, whenever you do a new edition, it's always difficult. And having a large community is good, because you get a lot of feedback and a lot of passion, but it's also challenging, because then you have some very strong voices in the community, and sometimes you disagree with them, and so you have to manage that disagreement and make sure it doesn't explode in a war, on an internet war. So I think that's the biggest difference that I find with other companies, is that community involvement, good and bad.
All right. That might do some of our overview questions, and we might get into some specifics if that's okay with you, chaps. We've had plenty of questions coming in from the audience. We have been selective in what we've allowed through the net, though. So first up, Matt, over across your time at Mantic and, observing Mantic, I guess Mantic will have garnered, plenty of lessons from trials and tribulations and successes of the launches of various products. How do you see the launch of Fourth being different to the previous editions?
Obviously, the first two really, the biggest amount of marketing around those first two was all around the game itself and kind of putting the models in place, all from Kickstarter. So that was the focus for those two. So once I was in the studio and taking over, the third edition was very much focused around where we got the lore from Vanguard and moving that on, but fleshing it out. So the real big thing for third edition was not just a clean-up of the rules. That was anticipated, but it was about expanding that lore. So, one of the original ideas for Kings of War was that, it will be quite light on lore, it will be quite an open world. You are the King of War, you write your own story in it, etc., etc. But by halfway through second edition, all the voices are like, what is this game? What am I doing? What am I playing in? What's the background for my faction? I need some context. So third edition for me was all about adding that context. And we went from something like 20 or 30 pages of background to over 200 in that first green book. So that was a big emphasis. And there was a big step up in presentation, art, photography, all that sort of stuff. I wanted to really raise the bar. I think with fourth edition, we've kind of dialed that up to 11. So we're hitting the presentation again, not just from a newbie and veteran point of view, but just in terms of visuals and everything else. The product range on the shelves will change and look different. The books that are coming out will, everything starts to look different, and you'll see that throughout all the branding. But we've obviously got a new army coming out. We've addressed all of with the new rules. We've looked at all the army lists and overhauled all of them. But the lore, we've sat back and said, right, okay, we've got in world time 10 to 15 year story arc here, taking all the threads that we've been spinning through Armada, Vanguard, previous books, novels, all of that, all coming to a head in fourth edition. We've got a huge story arc planned across multiple books and maybe spreading back out into other games and stuff again. Load of things will get resolved, a load of new things will get created. It's dialed up to 11 for fourth edition, and you'll see that as the blogs and the various things come out. We're massively excited for it, and I hope everyone else is too.
Well, certainly I reckon that was one of your best videos ever so far, with the with you and Alessio and Ronnie.
So some of the bits that were left out were even funnier, but probably not fit for publication, let's say.
And maybe it works because everyone can realise it's probably actually not that far removed from reality. The madman in a room locked away and, two people having to come in and fix the problems.
Possibly.
On the back of that, I guess, I mean, you touched on it before, Alessio and Matt, but this core design philosophy, I guess, going into fourth, was it really about keeping that spirit? I mean, Matt, you mentioned then, I guess, that, you really wanted to, it's continuing to build that universe, I guess, which is from a visual and a story point of view. Was it a key component to have the rules tell that story, that evolution of the story, or what would you see as that core design philosophy for fourth edition?
I mean, there's a very different, I guess, Matt can touch on the background and the IP side of things, but from a rules point of view, purely from a rules point of view, I think, I remember having the conversation early on when I asked you the main question was, do we retain what for me is kind of one of the unique selling points of Kings of War is that ability of using the chess clock, which is something that obviously you don't have to, in friendly games you don't, but I think it as far as I know, there are no other war games that try to do that. And I think it's for competitive play, it becomes a key distinguishing feature of the game. But if you want to maintain that feature, that influences big time your design. Basically, it constrains your design into things you can do and things you cannot do. The clearest example to explain what I'm talking about is often in war game systems, when in close combat, one side fights, the other side fights back, and then you resolve the combat, which obviously that wouldn't work with the chess clock. It wouldn't. It would break down in so many. So, and then reactions that cannot be reactions because of, again, you are managing your time, and the enemy is the opponent, the friendly opponent is managing their time. So that again informs what you can and cannot do in terms of rules. And that was a big decision. And Matt said, no, we are retaining that. I was like, cool, all right. So we have to think everything you do is informed by that. So so in terms of philosophy, that was a big thing that we retained. I tried to, again, retain one of the big things that Kings of War has, again, I think, is that simplicity at the start. And again, I've gone through the rules and I've taken a lot of bits that had appeared inside the rules in the early presentation of the rules, the beginning of the rules, when I tell you This is the shooting phase. This is the movement phase. This is how it works. There's a lot of references to things that are further on in the book, like special rules, etc., that started to appear in the beginning of the rules. For example, when you go, movement, terrain blocks the movement, except the flying creatures can fly over. So that is a reference to a special rule that made it into the initial presentation. And that again is what I was saying about, from the eyes of a beginner, I don't need that. I need to understand how the movement works. Then you give me the exceptions later. So I did a lot of that, moving bits back to either to the special rules or indeed to the advanced section, which is more for veterans, trying to keep the first part of the book, which is more for beginners, kind of simple, fresh, immediate, easy to pick up, because that, I think, is a very important thing, is the ability of recruiting people into the hobby. Because obviously a veteran community is veteran, but if you don't keep inputting fresh blood, then eventually in the future will die. You need new bodies, new people coming in. And that was the main thing that I was trying to do. So those are the two kind of principal philosophy, rules philosophy development points, if you want.
And I think to answer the question, how much does the rules and the expansion and the lore kind of inform each other? I think from a core game mechanics point of view, they aren't linked. But I think as soon as you start adding layers of detail in, as soon as you have armies in and army rules, and the units within those armies and stuff, I think that's where the flavour of the game starts to tie in with the lore. And obviously with like new army that we've got out and stuff like that, that's those two things have been developed side by side. Whereas a lot of the other armies will have developed over time, starting with the archetypes and things like that, and then the Mantic spin gets put on them. But so yeah, I think it's the layers on top of the core mechanics that tie in and give the flavour that sits alongside the lore. Just going back to how things have developed, I think the maps in each book, the map of the world in air quotes, you can tell how much is being developed by the size of the map in the book. So in the first and second edition, you just saw the areas kind of just about around the Infinite Sea. In third edition, I wanted to expand that, so you got much wider, further north, south, east, west. You saw a much bigger area. In fourth edition, the map is the entire world. It's the whole planet. You've got everything, and there's 2 timelines in there as well, which I know some people are crying out for, mapping everything, world events all the way through, up to the God War and then the God War onwards. One thing I'm pushing for in any fiction that gets written now is that it's all dated, so you know when it's happening.
So it sounds like, this plays into a question we had from Max K, who's one of our Australian players. To be honest, probably all the very good questions will come from Australians, just so you know.
Sure.
So, Alessio, it sounds like from a rules point of view, like your opinion is that nice, straightforward simplicity is how you balance attracting the new players and then, having some advanced version of the rules for keeping maybe those existing more tactical players engaged. And Matt, do you see that differently, or do you see it that, like, what do you think is the core of attracting new players to Kings? Is it that flavour that's then layered over through army rules, which I think in third edition, like a lot of players have appreciated, the development of the Northern Alliance and things? Do you see it the same way and differently? Like, what's your point of view on that?
It's probably multifaceted. I think there's obviously how do you attract people from a kind of a marketing point of view, getting people, attracting people online, on getting people into shops and playing that sort of thing. But I think the visuals, a lot of people are very, they'll see something and if it looks cool, then they'll take a look further. But I think it's very important, their first interaction with the game itself needs to be accessible, needs to be a low barrier to entry. It needs to be not taxing. There's nothing to think about. I've just read these rules. I understand them. There was no complexity in that. I can play my first game without having to refer to the rules too much. And I come out of that game thinking, wow, I want to play more. So I think, there's all the marketing, the visuals and everything else and the cool models and stuff will lead people to that first point. But if they bounce off the rules, then you've lost them, and all that work you did early on wasn't, was kind of wasted. So yeah, it's very, very important that the rules work for a new player.
I must say, actually, something you mentioned that I think is really important. It's not in the rules per se, but it is connected. Is that when I went to the tournament recently of Kings of War, which I hadn't seen for a long time, people's armies, there's been again an evolution. In this case, almost a revolution from my point of view, because I hadn't seen it for a while in what the armies look like. Because we went from a world of lots of individually based models on a tray to actually dioramas. Each unit is a diorama. That's what struck me as incredibly beautiful. It was amazing. It was seeing every single unit being an amazing diorama with a little scene, with the characters. It was gorgeous, and I think that is another thing that Kings of War does really well. And the rules again have been written more from a point of view. It isn't about. It's less strict in a way about the number of models on the moment, just because it wants to facilitate that gorgeous appeal of those things. Because if you see that, you go, wow, this army looks amazing. And there's also the huge advantage that actually when you pack it up is like, I have 10 things to put away, not 600 things to put away. So, it's both practical and gorgeous. So I think we shouldn't underestimate what the impact of that is. I think it's really important.
Yeah, I really like this discussion we're having about how you get new players in this modern world. And, maybe let's take it in the context of ranks and flanks. We mentioned we don't want the rules to be a barrier, but ranks and flanks brings a different animal where you might be painting 150 models, right? Alessio, you've been at this for a long time. You've been working with ranks and flanks games for a long time. Is there anything you had to specifically do for Kings of War 4th Edition just to make it easier to market a ranks and flanks game to the modern audience, which I would argue that it is moving to more fast-playing, low model count, skirmish-style games?
Yeah, I mean, certainly it is rank and flank, and it needs to be that. In fact, there's a rules-related thing we've done that is even more rank and flank, I think, is the fact we toned down the shooting, the effectiveness of shooting, and made it more into a shooting is there to soften the targets, not to destroy the target, which certainly echoes back to historical rank and flank, to historical, from Greeks to Romans to Middle Ages, where battles were not won with missile fire alone. It was always, is the crash, shield versus shield, spears versus spears, is that feel of close combat is how you resolve this, and of course, flanking is how you gain the advantage. So we gave more movement to things, try to encourage the dynamics of it and make it more fluid and trying to get around the flanks of the enemy. I think if you pitch to new people that have never played that, the big difference is not there are other games from other companies that tend to, where the game is more about the cards, about the rules combinations, about the huge firepower and the combos that you can do with firepower and special rules, etc. While this is more about your movement, is more of a thinker, of a person that wants to think. I won't say chess-like, but in a sense it is chess-like. You're planning, you're moving, you're predicting what the enemy is going to do. Is when you put your units forward in a certain position to think 2 moves ahead, what's he going to do? He's going to do this, and therefore his unit ends up in this position, and that will present the flank to my counter. But on the other end, the other guy knows that, so he will try to interrupt, put things in the way. So the exceptional thing of these games, rank and flank, is that if you can get the rules really simple, and that's the holy grail of design. The holy grail of design is when people are thinking about the moves, their next move. They're thinking about the tactics. They're not thinking about the rules. The rules are so simple they disappear. So you think about the game. That's what we're trying to do. And rank and flank is perfect for that. It is ideal for that.
Yeah, I guess if you played a game and the armies behaved in the way that you imagined and it felt right, it's all about feeling again, going back to what Ronnie, all about feeling, then I think you've achieved a great rule set, because there wasn't that cognitive overload of having to think about the rules, because it just happened naturally. And just on that, you touched on about kind of the industry and gaming as people have I guess, a little bit less time and less space for gaming. That's why we created Champions, to give people a taste of rank and flank on a smaller space and with less models to paint. And and if that's where they want to stop, then great. But if that gives them the taste of, okay, I want to take this to a bigger and more epic scale, then you can step into Kings of War. And of course, we're taking the characters from there. Those champions themselves will all appear in the Kings of War lists. We'll take their stories through as part of the story arc as we go through.
So we'll take a question from the audience. Mike Rossi asks, what was one thing you absolutely wanted to change from the 3rd edition rule set? And we'll start with Matt.
For me, there are a number of things, but army building was the big thing. I know some people liked it, and it kind of evolved from along the way, but I wanted to now this wasn't an evolution, this was a radical change. I wanted to bring it in line with our other games and how they'd been evolving. Kings of War was starting to feel like a bit of an outlier. It was to read it with a fresh pair of eyes, not a veteran player, was a bit mind-boggling as to how it worked and the exceptions, and this does this accepts this, and this. So I just wanted to make it much, much cleaner in line with our other games. And that new system then necessitated reordering all the army lists, which gave us the chance to then review all the profiles and everything else. So it's been a major overhaul, but I think it's a much simpler, cleaner system you can explain with a diagram and works across whether it's ambush, smaller games, whether it's standard games, whether it's legendary games. It tells you how to adapt to those, and I think it's a much better way of restricting spam armies and min-max things and stuff. You hopefully see more balanced armies coming through. Of course, as soon as it hits the community, someone goes, I can do this. And it's like, oh, no.
That always happens.
Why didn't nobody spot that of all the hundreds of games we've played? Which always happens. But, we can tackle that as those things arise.
So same question to you, Alessio. What was one thing you absolutely wanted to change from the 3rd edition rule set?
That's a very difficult question. Speaking of the rules, I cannot think of one thing. I think every phase of the game, there could be one thing that, I wouldn't know which one is the overall one thing that I could say. In the movement phase, I definitely wanted to bring those extra pivots. That was a big thing. I found it, again, it's very simple, the original version, but I found it a bit constraining. So after, I evolved myself. Of course, this was like you pointed out, 15 years ago. So I was like, I think I like a bit more flexibility in my options because particularly at when you're going at double speed, not being able to turn makes it very, very predictable where that threat from that unit is going to be next turn. So adding that is a subtle tweak, a simple tweak, but it opens up a lot of rules, tactics, dynamics. So for me, in the movement phase was the extra pivot. And maybe let's stick with that. That was the one thing that I thought I really wanted to do.
A lot of people, this game is typically, a lot of people will say rank and flank's 1 in the movement phase. So a lot of people will like the kind of the more restricted, less pivot route. But I think as soon as the players start playing a game with pivots, it will open up. Yes, I can't do some of the things I used to do in terms of blocking and angles and stuff like that, but it opens up a whole new world and the things that you can do. So it's like, it's learning it's the same game, but you're learning parts of it all over again. And it's not, I can't do this anymore. It's like, okay, wow, what can I do now? It just opens up more opportunities, which should be exciting for everyone, I think.
What you say is very true. I have experienced it with a lot of new editions of existing games. Particularly before people play it, and they just hear stuff. And these days there's a lot of, rumors and noise on the internet. People tend to judge with not a complete set of information. And I always say, play it. First play it. I had that very recently with the latest edition of Bolt Action as well. We made some changes and there was some like, oh my God, this is the end of the world. And the reply was always, play it first, then we'll talk. To be honest, I'm happy that a lot of people, almost like I paid them, came back and said, you know what? I hated that. Then I played it. actually, you're right, it's better. I enjoy it more. So I really hear and say the same thing to the Kings of War players. Play it, then we'll talk. Then, wait for the proper finish rules, the new rules. Play it all, play the games, then we talk.
What kind of false assertion is that, Alessio, that wargamers jump to conclusions, without having the full information?
I resemble that remark.
That's outrageous. Yeah, but I do understand everyone enjoys being told that they're right? When it happens in my job, I usually take a pause and I say, "Excuse me, can you please repeat that? Because I don't hear it at home." Now, feel free to give us some spoilers in this bit, but so you talked about kind of what you wanted to change, but what do you actually really think is going to be the most significant change about 4th edition that what people will notice that I guess, changes the game somewhat or changes a phase of the game or whatever? And maybe Matt, start with you.
I guess, obviously, love Kings of War. It got me into Mantic in the first place and brought me here. So it's Kings of War's fault I'm here. The way combat, because you're limited to, the constrained by the I go, you go. I do everything in my turn, you do everything in your turn. We've always kind of, I guess, the rules have always kind of tried to work out how to mimic that. And then you had bounce backs and you had withdraw and stuff like that. I think where we've got to now, with the ability to, while combats are now sticky, so you stay in contact unless you're either withdrawing or reforming, which allows you to move around. The ability to now split your attacks between the things you're engaged with, I think is a subtle thing, but it's massive. So before you'd be engaged and it'd be big battle lines, and you'd be like, well, why can't my horde split its attacks between these two things that it's attacking? Why does it have to only attack one? And it doesn't have to do that anymore. You can split your attacks. So I think that's again a very subtle thing, but I think it opens a huge amount of tactical options and realism.
That's definitely one of the biggest things. I mean, what will have the most impact if you go through the phases? The shooting not being able to absolutely annihilate is the thing that we keep. Sometimes when we are playtesting and we roll and go, destroyed, and the other guy goes, no. Oh yes, of course, it's not destroyed. It's just wavering. So that is very different. It feels very different, and the feeling of it is that you're shooting to weaken the target for the charge, and you're shooting to try to hold them back, which again for me is one of the places where the rules really help representing what that reality. I'm thinking historical reality, but obviously fantasy reality in this case as well. That's a big change. That's a big change that has a lot of impact, and it also simplifies the nerve system, which again less complexity. So yeah, that's another big one. But like you were saying, Matt, the picking the army, again, how to select an army, that's possibly the single biggest thing, because people will have to look at their armies and restart the process, which is a great process. I mean, it's like in role-play games, what I love is making the characters, maybe more than playing the game, because of the thing that goes in your head. You're thinking about what this character is going to do. For war games, it's the same as about your armies. And if you build the army, you kind of go, right, I'll put this unit and that unit, and the tactic will be this, and these two units will do that. And that process, you have to start again, which, again, is that the most enjoyable part? The game in your head when you're thinking about the army? So it's a great, great new thing that you have to learn again.
And just to, I guess, allay some fears, once we developed the new way of army building, I got the RC to send me probably 200 lists from various tournaments, and I went through and made sure that I wasn't invalidating 100% of everyone's armies. It's like, okay, these are roughly 85% fits here in most cases, and people are going to want to change their armies anyway because the rules have changed, so they're going to adapt to that and their play styles and things like that. And we've adjusted all the points. So your 2,300 point army isn't going to exactly be 2,300 point. Well, you might be lucky. Anyway, so people, new edition, people are going to tweak. But what I didn't want is someone to look at their army and say, this entire thing is I can't use any of it. And I'm expecting everyone to probably drop to start with 2,000 points, and then of course the tournament scene will creep back up to whatever it wants to creep back up to. But I can't see anyone not being able to play with their armies. It will just look slightly different because they'll have to configure it in a different way, and they might not be able to take this many of this thing, but they can take this thing instead. So we put the work in to make sure that there was no rage quitting on that side.
Yeah, so you only invalidated the armies of wankers, basically.
You said that. No comment.
Rob's going to edit me heavily anyway. He always does.
Well, so another thing we didn't touch upon is the scenarios. Again, part of that process of making it appealing to beginners and to advanced players and to veterans is that I've basically been very honest in the first part of the rules. And again, this is me after 15 years. Maybe 15 years ago, I was more a competitive guy that was going into, more of this scenario, that scenario when I play the game. But actually, these days, I'm turning a bit more like Ronnie, where I just want to have some fun. I don't want to think too hard. And therefore, the honest thing there was 90% of the times now, if I can just play the standard game, which basically is just literally, I turn up, line up my army, you line up your army, and then we kill each other without worrying about, objectives and secondary objectives. So it's a simpler, if you want, approach. But I find that a lot of people, like Ronnie, like me, we tend to play that. That's the game we play most often. So I went, okay, this is where you start. So we put that as the starting point in the core rules. And then, of course, we did a lot of work with the community, with the RC to balance the scenarios in creating a matrix of different conditions. Something that I do in a lot of games is trying to insist on instead of having a number of scenarios, have some victory conditions and some setups. That gives you a matrix of potential games, which is quite vast and different. But yeah, no, I think that going for the start here, it's simple. Don't have to think too much about the scenario, but more about your army. For me, at this age, at this stage of my evolution as a gamer, is more than enough because the complexity comes from the armies, from the movement, it's almost like it's almost like a chess game. This is how we start, and then the complexity comes. And to be honest, that kind of simple scenario also kind of represents a lot of historical, classical battles. It's different from more modern type of games where actually, yes, you're right, objectives are important. We have to capture that place. We have to go. Well, actually, on historical battles, sometimes we're literally, meet you on the field, and then you line up your army, and we fight. There isn't this particular objective is important kind of thing. So that.
Yeah, and even though we've got in the advanced section all those scenarios, and you can roll for your terrain setup and roll for your deployment setup and roll to see which scenario you're doing. So there's all those possible combinations. We're fully aware that people will have their favourites. Tournament organisers will probably pick in advance. So it's the options there, but obviously we're not expecting everyone to do whatever. We create the rules, but the kind of guidelines. At the end of the day, it's the players will play what they want. It's their game. If they want a narrative game that does something completely different, they will do that. We can't dictate that.
Yeah, we just have a real quick question from Chris. He just wants to know, is the flank still 45 off the front?
All arcs are still 45 degrees.
The arcs haven't changed, yes.
We have a question from Corey Reynolds. He says, what is something you wanted to change for 4th edition, but you couldn't quite make it work?
Ooh, that's a good one. I remember the way we tried to address combats, and there was one way which was funny. We was almost going for it, and then eventually we decided against it, which instead of the bounce back, the traditional Kings of War bounce back, we had the push forward. The units were hit and pushed back. They went back an inch at the end of the fight to separate them again with the pushback. But again, that had problems and stuff. So we tried it for a long time. We tried it a few times and didn't do that. Anything else that we...
I remember a 4-hour, let's not call it an argument, between you, me, Carl and Ronnie about base sizes.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Because we thought, okay, is this our opportunity to standardise base sizes across units and rather have all these things? And we're like, yes, and we were swaying one way, and like, this is a great idea, and then there we go. Ronnie coming in, who is like, is everyone going to rage quit if we make them rebase all their armies? Is it commercial suicide? Blah blah blah. So round and round and round, and in the end, obviously, as you know, everyone, we've settled on the heroes change, and that's it.
Yeah.
Everything else stays the same.
We've got a question from David. He says, will the advanced rules include things like siege, legendary battles, ambush, smaller scale games?
So siege and stuff are not in there at this stage. We've kept it out for the moment. That might get introduced in one of the expansion books. It might be online content. Haven't decided yet. Obviously, I don't think that the 3rd edition siege rules are impacted at all really by this. I don't think so. It's certainly very easy to adapt. So I didn't think we need to do that. But so we kept things like that out, but things like the time games and stuff like that are in the advanced rules.
Time game scenarios
in there. Command orders are considered advanced stuff because the kind of stuff you don't want to when you're learning the game. You don't want those kind of those extra levels to think about all the things you can lay in. Now I'm fully expecting that existing veteran players will just play everything straight off the bat. They'll just dive straight in and play the game as they're playing it now. But that is that clear that presentation separation for new players, which we felt was important.
We're going to jump to some more lore-based questions, if that's okay. Matt, how do you see the narrative progressing with 4th? Like, what's the main thing we're seeing there?
As I say, as alluded to before, there's we spent a large amount of time building an overarching narrative for this edition and where we want to take it into the future, tying up the threads that we've been spinning elsewhere. It's a huge world-spanning chain of events. As I said, we show what the whole world looks like and the repercussions of that. With the expansion books as they come out, they will move that story on. There will be novels coming out alongside, hopefully, those expansion books as well. So with the first expansion book that comes out at launch, so book 1 is out straight away. There's a novel alongside that as well, which is part of that story. There's a lot there. Champions, as I said, those champions, their stories will get told throughout. So, and because times are moving on, humans, elves and dwarves and stuff obviously survive, but, some humans will have retired because they're too old at this point. Some new ones will come in. Orcs only live for 10 or 12 years. So there will be some churn on some of the characters and things like that. We definitely want to include the community. As I said, community is a big part of Kings of War. With summer campaigns and things like that, where there'll be not the massive world-changing events because we know what those are, but there'll be some bits where we like, okay, well, A or B could happen here. The summer campaign can decide what we write into the next book. We'll leave that space open, and maybe something does change on the map because of the results of players' games. And I know some people are often quite sceptical that those things are actually happen, but we do leave them open for that, and we do write those things into the lore. But yeah, huge plans for the lore moving on, and a big not just in terms of its length, but its breadth as well.
Well, breadth, because reportedly one new army's coming from very, very far away, Matt. So, and that kind of plays into a question from John Paul Fuller Jackson is, how do you keep finding the design space both in the lore and in the rule set for new factions? He said, is it getting a bit tight?
Yeah, that's why we've gone to D9s for the stat lines. Yes and no. I mean, there's entire world we can now explore, and obviously we needed to expand the map to bring that new faction in. But over that side of the world, there's a lot's already been written, and there's some very exciting things over there which can go into. Yes, there'll be some challenges in terms of design space for their rules, but we've obviously got a very solid set of special rules which you can have in combination of stuff, but the command orders as those armies roll out and they get their full set of command orders, I think is where a lot of the flavour will come from, which is exactly what we've seen in Firefight and Warpath and the other games, which is, so we're just bringing Kings of War in line, really. That's where you get a lot of the flavour. I think in terms of visuals and models and stuff, it's kind of endless. That's not a problem. And of course, there's things we haven't explored yet, even in the world as we've seen it up till 3rd edition. There are factions in there that we haven't fully fleshed out yet, or as we go through 4th edition, will get added or will get adapted with the Mantic spin on them. I'm looking at you, elves. As we get to them. So, we're well aware that there are still gaps in the range, that there's some older models that, we need refreshes, and, that it's all planned as the books roll out and stuff like that. All of this will get addressed. There'll be new plastics, there'll be all sorts. Massively exciting for, not just for us from a creativity point of view, but it's like, once you've created that, what's the reaction from the community? Massively excited for their excitement.
Yeah, Alessio, hearing Matt talk, as a rules designer, how hard is it when you have 28 armies? That's a lot of variables to balance.
Yes, but I mean, I tended to concentrate on the core rules, because I think for me, if the engine works, then the things you put on top of the engine provide the flavor, provide the complexity, but you need to have a solid engine that works. So I focus more on that. Matt focused more on the development of the armies. And in a way, I was happy to leave how many points value should this be? How many points value is this unit to Matt and the RC? Because having to come fresh and do all of that, it would have taken several years, I think, on my own. So no, I tended to focus on that, on the core rules.
Yeah, it's slightly easier for me anyway, because obviously I'm so involved in all of the planning and the law, right? Even if I'm not writing the law myself, the planning of the law and where it's heading and stuff like that, I can make sure that the army lists are coherent with that, or they're getting lined up where we want them to go. So, I think that split of roles between me and Alessio is kind of naturally formed.
Yeah, and it's more relaxing to read the rules, give feedback, read all the analysts, give feedback, because then you're giving feedback on other people's work. Always good. That's easier.
So for the Undead fans out there, anything coming for Undead?
Not in the first few books, but what we're going to reveal all of the... obviously every army's changed. We've tweaked things and how things unlock and how they're structured. So there's stuff for everyone. But we will be releasing the names of all of the expansion books throughout the edition, so people can guess at which point their army's going to get some stuff. But to be clear, and again to allay some fears, just because a book is coming out and it will focus on 3 or 4 particular armies, those armies will get some new models, some new plastic, maybe some new heroes. We'll probably unlock some cool combinations. They'll flesh out some more command orders and stuff to give them some more flavour. That doesn't mean we're ignoring everything else. So, the companion will be the place where you get the latest rules. If we need to balance some other armies, as books come out and as the edition moves on and the meta changes and stuff, we will still do that. You're not going to have to wait, 3 years before your book comes out, before your army changes at all. If there's something wrong, or it's too undercosted, or we feel that as part of a summer campaign, this has changed in the lore, therefore let's introduce some formations into these, all that can happen outside of the books. You don't have to buy a book if you don't want to. It will be in the companion. The focus of those books is driving the story on. Yes, the lists will be in there as well, but they're narrative books with the enhanced lists in. But no one should feel left out, because everything's been pointed with the same formula. So yes, you might get some cool new options, but they'll be costed.
Matt, you won't be able to see it behind me, but I stupidly have just bought a brand new 3D printer that's to upgrade my one that's not that old. And we've heard that salamanders will become fully STL, or that's been alluded to.
Yes, that's correct.
What do you see as the future for Mantic in this kind of space?
We don't see plastic going away anytime soon. 3D printing is still. I mean, it's obviously getting bigger, but it's still a bit of a niche. Not everyone has the room to do it. Not everyone has the desire to do it. So we will support it and treat it just like if it was plastic or resin, it's just another means of delivering cool models to people. We will be offering print on demand ourselves. We'll be partnering with people as well. So, in your country, there'll be someone, hopefully, that, you're not specifically talking about Australia, but wherever, there'll hopefully be in the future a Mantic partner where you can order our models from. So, part of not just Kings of War, but our other lines as well. We're looking at expanding rapidly the amount of models that we've got, fill those gaps, add new ones, add hero options, all that sort of stuff. And like with Salamanders, plans to do, okay, well, let's tackle this faction. The chances of us bringing it out in plastic or in other models for, X years is that's too far away, but people want it now. Let's do it digitally. So that option's now available to us, but we don't want it to stop people being able to get those models either. So, which is why we're looking at the print on demand solutions too.
Yeah. So, and potentially, I guess then we can expect that they'll be supported in a similar way via the rules to what you might do in plastic, that it's not we'll put them here to forget about them.
Salamanders are in the first expansion book. Their armies in there with its enhanced list straight off the bat.
I know Rob will have a question then for you.
Where's the Commandant model? I've been asking that for years.
It's digital.
I'll take digital any day of the week.
I've seen it. It's sculpted. It's there.
Oh, it's coming, Rob. It's coming.
We're getting close to wrapping up the show. We did want to ask some questions about the future, Matt. And Carl asks the question, will there be a big green book or equivalent like we had for 3rd edition?
There's probably less lore pages in this one. So we've boiled it down to just what you need to know to get started again from a player's point of view, from a new person's point of view. We are looking to create a lore library online. So everything that we've written so far is available online, so we can concentrate on writing the new stuff, which will also then move online as well. So it's all in one place. So it won't be as big, but the rule book will contain the core rules, army lists, the advanced rules, and a background section. So, it's still going to be well over 200 pages, but it won't be the 400 pages that the green book will. But then, of course, there's the expansion books as well, which is add and add and add.
There's a few questions from people here, including Nathan Arnold, that we can kind of roll into one. And you've kind of touched on it, Matt. So it sounds like, and I think Ronnie had mentioned this too, that effectively we're moving from potentially away from a 1 yearly update to the game to maybe a biannual in books. And is the companion going to be used more as more of a living rule set rather than having to wait for that?
100%, yeah. 100%. So there won't be the Clash of Kings book. Won't be a thing anymore. So there'll be these expansion books which will come out regularly. The plan is roughly every 6 months, so to a year. And obviously around those books will be activity around new plastics and models and things like that. And that will either be new stuff into existing armies or a refresh of a range where we can put some Mantic IP stamp on it. Look at what we did with Twilight Kin and how they changed in their appearance and their army makeup and stuff like that. So that sort of thing will happen. So if we don't do plastics for a particular army at the moment, we obviously have on your radar that we may well suddenly do it, and it may look radically different by the time in terms of its appearance and even how it behaves by the time we get to it. But yes, updates to rules and lists and profiles and stuff in the companion, regular updates in there too, as a kind of a living truth, if you like.
So, Alessio, a question for you. Get you back into the show a little bit. Previously we would have erratas and FAQs and all those things. Is that going to continue?
I would imagine so. Yes. I think that the rules, particularly as a new edition, so there will be feedback. I'm sure there is always feedback, and so we'll have to sit down and digest the feedback and decide how to approach it. Is errata FAQs or the new book?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things we've put into the advanced section is a section on edge cases and clarifications on stuff. So we know that there's going to be some different people once they'll find some weird situations, weird scenarios. How do you deal with those? We've tried to tackle some of them. We've got some play tests over as we wrap the book up over the next couple of weeks. going back to people and saying, right, based on the latest games you've had, did anything creep up that was a bit weird? And then we can, just before we go to print, we can say, okay, we'll just add a sentence in here in the core rules that will clean that up and take that away. Or, okay, let's add a couple of pages, not that easy, but add a couple of pages into those clarifications. So let's knock that on the head now rather than having to write an FAQ later. Because yes, we can see that we need to explain how you deal with that situation. Let's just do that now. So we've got, we're a few weeks away from being able to print, so we have got time to just do those last little bits of play testing and make sure they're in the book before it goes to print.
I mean, it was part of that process of, again, the same thing I said about the rules, of trying to bring some of the material presented early on in the rules into a separate section, was taking away a lot of those, because there were a lot of diagrams that dealt with edge cases that 95% of the games, 99% of the games would never happen. So we took a lot of those and put them in this advanced section for those specific moments, for those rare moments where something odd happens. Then you have an explanation, but it's not loaded up front, because again, you're reading the rules for the first time and you're going, oh, and by the way, this could happen, and in this case do that, but that this could happen is so rare that really we don't want you to think about that when you're learning the rules. You will not encounter that for your first 20 games, so don't worry about that.
And Matt, what do you see the role of the RC now? What's their role going to be moving forward?
Obviously, they'll still be valuable. There's still the kind of a bridge between us and the community. We can't be at every event. We can't obviously, as much as fantasy is my first love, and we all love Kings of War. There are other things we're doing, so we can't concentrate on it all the time. But the RC, they're that link with us, with the community. I think their role will now be to pass on things, through Alessio to review and say, okay, well, that's how we deal with that situation, rather than writing the rules themselves. But they'll still be hugely important when it comes down to helping us develop army lists and dealing with balance changes and meta and stuff, feeding that back to us. Obviously making suggestions, and we think this unit needs this, we think this army needs this, and helping us with the, as the books come out, looking at those 4 armies, those lists, and helping us test them, make them, sending out to their play testing groups and getting all that feedback. So they're kind of, so they're still very much as they were, I guess, just a little bit less on the rules writing, because that will be, and figuring out solutions, that'll be Alessio.
You released Champions not that long ago, and we've seen a bit of dabbling in what I guess the community's kind of felt like could be the intro game for Kings. Do you think you've settled on it and found it with Champions? And like, if the answer is yes, do you think it'll naturally have to change with additions then at the same time in the future?
I think it's probably a little bit hard to know at the moment whether Champions has become a feeder into Kings of War, because the Kings of War community has kind of been anticipating Fourth, so it's kind of been a bit on pause on Fourth. Champions has been very, very successful. We've gone through reprints, we've done have to send reorder and to build and send stuff back out again. I think it will establish itself as a feeder into Kings of War, but it was very much, we didn't want it to only be that. We wanted it to be it's a thing in its own right. So I think as Kings of War develops, we don't need to also develop the rules for Champions. They obviously have a shared base, but there wasn't. One of the things we didn't want to do is tie them, make them almost exactly the same game. We wanted them to feel different and to be different. It's very much established itself as its own thing at the moment, but the hope is, and I'm sure it will, as Fourth rolls out and launches, it will become a feeder into it. But that's a sort of wait and see for how that pans out with the community.
And then, in the same world, what about Vanguard? Is that, as far as Mantic's concerned, is that a bit dead in the water now? Any thoughts of turning those gentle hands of Alessio towards it?
Certainly can do.
Why do you think my hands are gentle? Please talk about caressing me.
I've just heard rumours.
We've got lots of games set in Panathor. We've obviously got Armada, we've got Dungeon Saga, DSO. the people are looking for Dungeon Saga 2, Vanguard 2. There's all these games that we could do. I know where they can fit into the story arc we've got planned. So I've got that, so even if we haven't got plans in the immediate future for those things, I'm aware that people want them. I'm aware that where I can slot them in and make them part of the narrative, part of the continuing to be part of the world. So, none of them are forgotten. It's just obviously with everything, it's just like, when's the best time to do it? Who's the best person to do it? How does it tie in with everything else that's going on? The usual things.
Dungeon Saga is an awesome game. I've got a 6-year-old daughter that loves Dungeon Saga. So,
Well, the final question, we'll start with Matt. Obviously, new additions, things change, armies may become more into favor, some may fade away. And I know in this initial launch with 4th edition, all the armies are going to be in the book. But going forward, how are you going to communicate, what armies are ebbing and flowing, if that makes sense?
Well, obviously, the RC will help us from what the community is seeing, how they're playing the game, etc. So we can balance things that way. Obviously, our focus in terms of models and just marketing and stuff will focus on the books as they come out. But they're not individual army books. That will be 3 or 4 armies at a time. There'll be a good slug of new lore and all sorts of art and stuff for each army as it comes out. So I think we will try and maintain the balance across all the armies and keep them all balanced. Obviously, from a where we're looking, that'll be very much as the books come out. But all the others aren't forgotten as part of that. It's just we won't necessarily be talking about dwarves when the book about that contains the elves is coming out. That won't be the focus. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that in the story in that book we don't refer to events that are happening elsewhere and talk about things, because we'll be needing to set things, explain what's happened elsewhere in the world, which is repercussions here, and tee things up for future books. But yeah, in terms of models and army lists and stuff like that, our focus will be on the books as they're released in terms of presentation and things.
So what's the first army you're going to cull, Matt?
What do you collect?
Surely it's Ratkin slaves. They belong in the bin.
I wanted the Ratkin army, but okay, we'll see.
No, normal, not normal Ratkin slaves.
Slaves,
yeah.
So there has been some consolidation of armies. I mean, there was a bit of sprawl. Try to make sure that no one is left behind. So I think we gave one of the examples already. That in some slides that people have seen that you can take some heroes will unlock certain things in armies. So there isn't an explicit Ratkin slaves army, but in the Abyssal Dwarfs you can take Skinfire, and he will unlock Ratkin options. So you can you're not losing out.
That flavour still survives.
Yeah, we've replicated that where we have consolidated, and if a particular unit option has been taken away, that doesn't mean we won't bring it back when that book comes out and we do like cool new unit, cool new models for it or something like that. Just because we've consolidated some things doesn't mean everything's gone away forever.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for the candour on that. I think most people have been expecting some form of consolidation, so I don't think that'll take anyone by surprise. Really wanted to thank you guys for giving up your time. We've overstayed our welcome on the allotted time slot we sent you, so we very much appreciate you letting us go over. We want to tell everyone, make sure you're keeping an eye out for the blogs that are coming out from Mantic basically all this month. They've got your name on them, Alessio. I wonder, did you? Yeah. We'll say from Alessio, right?
Yeah, well, the ones on the armies specifically will be by Matt, well, not by me, but yes, these ones are by me. Yeah.
Yep, great. We hope everyone really enjoyed that insight into Mantic and behind the new edition of Kings of War. Again, thanks for your time, guys.
Thank you.
And until next time, keep countercharging.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Countercharge. Please let us know what you thought of the show by emailing us at counterchargepodcast@gmail.com, on Twitter at countercharge15, or by commenting on the Countercharge Kings of War podcast Facebook group. If you enjoy the show, you can help others find out about it by leaving positive reviews on iTunes. Until next time, keep countercharging. Music is a composition of Kevin MacLeod and is licensed under Creative Commons.